Imagine an empire that lasted over 600 years, a dynasty that stretched from the deserts of Arabia to the gates of Vienna, an empire that ruled 3 continents, controlled the world's most strategic trade routes, and shaped the destiny of millions. This was not just a kingdom. This was not just a sultanate. This was the Ottoman Empire, a force so powerful that both Europe and Asia trembled at its name. But how did it rise from the ashes of collapsing states? How did a small frontier tribe transform into the most dominant empire of its age? And why, after centuries of unmatched glory, did it finally crumble into dust? Stay with me, because this is not just history, it is the story of ambition, strategy, betrayal, and survival. You are watching the World Narrative, where stories from the past come alive and the headlines of today begin to make sense. The story begins in the late 13th century. Anatolia was in chaos. The once mighty Seljuk Empire had fractured, leaving behind small principalities known as Beyliks. Among them was a modest tribe led by a man named Osman I. Osman was no king. He commanded only a few warriors. But what he had was vision, a vision of uniting the Turks and pushing into the weakened Byzantine lands. His followers became known as the Ottomans, named after Osman himself. Osman's successors carried his dream forward. Run fast. His son Orhan captured the city of Bursa in 1326, making it the first Ottoman capital. From there, the Ottomans expanded rapidly into Byzantine territory, but it was not just military might that gave them strength. The Ottomans used clever alliances, efficient administration, and religious tolerance to integrate diverse peoples under their rule. Then came Mehmed II, known to history as Mehmed the Conqueror. In 1453, he launched a campaign that would define the empire forever, the Siege of Constantinople. After weeks of relentless bombardment, the walls that had stood for 1,000 years finally fell. The Ottomans marched into the greatest city of the medieval world, renaming it Istanbul. This was more than a conquest. It was the birth of an empire that would dominate global politics for centuries. The conquest of Constantinople transformed the Ottomans into a superpower. Trade routes from east to west now flowed through their hands. Mehmed built schools, mosques, and palaces, turning Istanbul into a jewel of civilization. But the true height of the empire would come under one man, Suleiman the Magnificent. Suleiman ruled for nearly 50 years. He expanded the empire into Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. His armies stood at the gates of Vienna. His navy dominated the Mediterranean. But Suleiman was not only a warrior, he was a lawmaker. Under him, the empire developed a sophisticated legal system, earning him the title lawgiver. The Ottoman Empire was not just a military machine, it was a cultural powerhouse. Architecture flourished. Mosques with soaring domes and delicate calligraphy defined the skyline. Science, poetry, and philosophy thrived in its cities. For centuries, Istanbul rivaled Paris, London, and Rome as a center of global civilization. But no empire lasts forever. After Suleiman, the crux began to show. Weak sultans, palace intrigues, and corruption slowly eroded the foundations of power. The once unstoppable Ottoman army began to falter against Europe's rising powers. Technology, science, and industry advanced rapidly in the West. In 1683, the empire faced its greatest test, the Battle of Vienna. The Ottomans launched a massive siege, hoping to capture the heart of Europe. But European forces united in a desperate defense. The Ottomans were crushed. The dream of conquering Europe ended that day. From then on, the empire would fight not for expansion but for survival. The next centuries were marked by decline. One by one, territories slipped away. The Balkans rebelled. The Russians advanced south. European powers called the Ottoman Empire the sick man of Europe. Reforms were attempted. New armies, new schools, new industries. But corruption and resistance from within slowed progress. By the 19th century, the empire was caught in a deadly trap. Nationalist movements tore apart its provinces. Serbia, Greece, and Egypt slipped from its grasp. At the same time, Britain, France, and Russia carved influence across its lands. The Ottoman sultans tried desperately to modernize, but every reform was too little, too late. Nationalism now became the empire's greatest enemy. In the Balkans, Christian populations demanded independence. Serbia rose first. Then Greece fought a bloody war of liberation, supported by European powers. Each rebellion weakened the Ottomans further. By the late 1800s, large parts of the Balkans were gone forever. Meanwhile, Europe circled like vultures. Russia sought influence in the Black Sea. Britain and France fought to control Ottoman trade routes. Even Austria and Italy claimed territories. The empire was no longer feared. It was carved, pressured, and manipulated by stronger nations. The sultans tried to resist collapse with reforms known as the Tanzimat. New schools were opened, new armies were trained, Western-style laws were introduced. But reforms clashed with tradition. Commercialism reigned widespread. The empire modernized on the surface, but remained fragile inside. By the early 20th century, frustration boiled over. A revolutionary group called the Young Turks seized power in 1908. They promised to restore strength and unity, but their rule was unstable. Instead of revival, the empire stumbled into new crises, and ultimately into the greatest war the world had ever seen. In 1914, the Ottomans entered World War I on the side of Germany. They hoped victory would restore their power. Instead, the war became their death sentence. Battles raged in Gallipoli, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. At first, there were moments of resistance and even triumph, but the empire was too weak to withstand the combined might of its enemies. By 1918, the Ottoman Empire lay in ruins. The Allies occupied Istanbul. Its Arab lands were seized by Britain and France. For the first time in 6 centuries, the House of Osman had lost its grip on power. The once mighty empire was reduced to a shadow of Anatolia itself. But from the ashes of the empire, a new nation rose. Led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, Turkish nationalists fought to drive out foreign powers. In 1923, the Republic of Turkey was born. The Ottoman Empire was gone, but its legacy remained in architecture, culture, law, and the memory of 6 centuries of rule. The story of the Ottomans is not just about power and collapse. It is a reminder that every empire, no matter how strong, must one day face its end.